All right, we're going to look at some more key features. So our previous lesson was on domain and range, and now we are going to do intervals of increasing, decreasing, positive, oh, well, let me underline, there we go, and negative. And we're still going to do that interval notation. So they probably are new concepts. So you had seen domain and range before, you just hadn't done interval notation. Now these are new and we're going to do interval notation. Okay, so here's a little picture. I'll try to color code it. Increasing, think about when is the graph going uphill. So remember, always read a graph from left to right. Think about if you were like a little car, here's your little dot and you're riding up a road, you're increasing, then you're flat, then you're increasing again, then you're going back down. So that's how you want to think about a graph, going from left to right. So increasing, when is the graph going uphill? Decreasing, when is the graph going downhill? And constant, when is the graph flat? All right, so if we look at this graph, it is increasing where it is blue. So from here to here, and remember, anytime we do interval, we say where it starts and where it stops. And what's nice about this one is you only care about the x coordinates. And we're going to do a problem in just a minute. The decreasing is where it's red, so from here to here. And then the constant is where it's green, so from here to here. Alright, so hopefully that little picture helps. And now we're going to look at a graph and we're going to talk about it. And it's not too bad. Okay, so here's a graph. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to plot the turning points. So turning points are anywhere it starts to change. So if I was a little car and I'm driving along, I'm going uphill, and then right here, I start to turn. I start to go in a different direction. And then I go downhill and I go downhill, and right here, I would start going uphill. So I'm turning direction. So what we're going to do is we're going to label these points. So that first point looks like it's -2, 9. And the next one looks like it's 1, 0. So usually they would give you a function and you could put it in your calculator and get those points exactly. But today we're just going to eyeball it just so that we can get through this. Okay, so I'm going to highlight. Increasing is where it's going uphill. So I'm going to do this in blue. Increasing would be from here to here, and then from here to here. Alright, so whenever we do this, we're doing interval notation. So it's kind of like, where does it start, comma, stop. And remember, we always read from left to right. So if you look at this first blue value, it's going to go way downhill forever and ever and ever. So it's going to start at -infinity, and we're going to put a parenthesis around it. And then it's going to stop when x gets to -2. And then we're going to use a U symbol to show that there's a gap in between the next phase. So notice there's a little gap in between where we didn't highlight. We got this blue line right here, and then a gap and another blue starting. So the next place that the blue line starts is when x is 1. And then it keeps going up and up forever, so it really doesn't stop until you get to positive infinity. That is where it's increasing. So notice that I had 2 places that were shaded in blue, 1, 2, and when I wrote my interval notations, I had 2 different interval notations, 1, 2. Okay, the reason that we put parentheses around these is because it's not actually increasing or decreasing at the turning point, it's just changing. So anytime you do this, you're probably going to put just a parentheses around it. Okay, now decreasing I'm going to do in red. It is decreasing from here to here. Alright, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say where it starts and where it stops. So it starts when x is -2, and it stops when x is 1. Once again, we're going to put parentheses around it because it's not actually decreasing at those points. It's just changing. All right. And then constant would be wherever the graph is flat. So I don't see anywhere the graph is flat, so we're just going to put an NA because it's not applicable. All right, we'll do some more because I know it's a little confusing. Let's talk about some positive and negative because that's another thing we're going to do. So positive, I got it in yellow. That is, when is the graph above the x-axis? So if you look at that graph, everywhere that's shaded in yellow is above the x-axis. Negative we'll do in green. When is the graph below the x-axis? Everywhere it's shaded in green, it's below. And then zeros, you've talked about this before. Here, I'll do it in red. Zeros are, oh, that's not red. There we go. Zeros are where it hits the x-axis. So anywhere it would actually hit that graph. So we'll look at some examples. This is the same one we just did. So first thing is we're going to look, we're actually going to look for the zeros first because they're a little bit easier. So zeros, I'm going to do in red. It's anywhere it hits the x-axis. So right here and right here. I'm going to plot those points. That's a -3, 0. That's a 1, 0. So the places it's 0 is at -3, 0. And at 1, 0. Okay, so that's the coordinate points. But remember, we're doing it in interval notation. So if you were doing this in interval notation and wrote this, you're actually telling me it starts with -3 and ends at 0. It starts with 1 and ends at 0. And that's the difference between interval notation and a point. Okay, so I know you've been taught when you write a 0 to do it as a coordinate point. When we do it for this purpose only, we're going to say x equals -3 and x equals 1. So I'm not getting confused with coordinates and with intervals. Okay. Positive is anywhere the graph is above the x-axis. Oh, missed that. So right here, it's above the x-axis, and then also over here. All right, so remember, interval notation, we're saying comma where it starts and where it stops. And we always read it from left to right. So this first little yellow piece, it starts at -3 and it ends when you get to 1. And then again, when you start at 1 and you go all the way to infinity. So when you're doing interval notation, you're talking about the x-coordinates. When x-coordinate starts at -3 and it goes to 1, it's above the x-axis. And then at 1, and then anything bigger than 1, it's going to be above the x-axis. Negative I'm going to do in green. Negative is only green right here. So it keeps going down forever and left forever. So this one starts with negative infinity and then it stops when you get to -3. Alright, so let me try again. If you were to like do a dotted line where it goes through the x. So to the left of that first dotted line, let's do this. You're going to be below the x-axis. The graph is below it. And then when your x's start to be -3 to 1, you're above the x-axis. And then after 1 and everything bigger than 1, you're above the x-axis. So you're negative over here from negative infinity to -3. Then in the middle from -3 to 1, you're positive. And then again, when you're 1 to positive infinity, you're positive. and then you only hit 0 when you're at -3 and -1. I mean, in +1, sorry. I know it's complicated. Let's do another example. Oh, just kidding. I'll do some examples on the next slide, I promise. So here's an EOC problem that they have put on the Math 3 problem before. When you take the Math 3 EOC, it is not all multiple choice. There are drag and drop questions, there are fill in the blank, there's short answer, all that stuff. So what you're doing here is you're looking at the picture, and down here you have 4 options, and these are in interval notation. These are not coordinate points. It's saying when x is between -4 and 1, is that decreasing, increasing, positive, or negative? When x is between -2 and 0, is it decreasing, increasing, positive, or negative? When x is between 0 and 2, is it decreasing, increasing, positive, or negative? And when x is between 0 and 4, is it decreasing, increasing, positive, or negative? So I'm going to give you some time to put this in the best category it fits. Only one goes in each category. And see if you can figure this out. Okay, so the first one, let's look at -4 and -1. So here, x is -4, x is -1. So you're talking about between -4 and -1, what is this graph doing? So it's definitely above the x-axis, so I would put that as positive. Okay, so hopefully you put that one there. Then the next one is from -2 to 0, so I'm going to highlight that on my graph. Between -2 and 0, here's the graph. It's above the x-axis and below it, so it can't be positive or negative. And if you think about if you were riding in a little car, you would definitely be going downhill. So I would say that that value is decreasing. So I'm going to put decreasing from -2 to 0. And then I think the last two are the most challenging because you have to be careful because one of them fits in both categories, but you got to put them where they go best. So let me do the 0, 4 one first. When x is between 0 and 4, here it is. The graph is both below the x-axis and above it, so it's not positive or negative, but it's definitely going uphill. So I would call that one increasing, which makes the last one negative, but let's make sure. So from 0 to 2. From 0 to 2, here's the graph. It's increasing, but all of it is underneath the x-axis, so that makes that one fall in the negative category. So this one right here is the one people will get confused because it fits in both the negative and the increasing, but you can only put these options in one place, so that one is definitely going to be just the negative. Okay, I know that's a little hard, so let's just do one more, and we'll do all of this together. Okay, so we're going to find the intervals where the function is, let's do just increasing first. So I'm looking for where is the graph going uphill, so I'm going to highlight it. From right here to right here, definitely going uphill, and from right here to right here. And I'm only going to talk about the x values, and I'm going to say where it starts and where it stops. So if I'm talking about this first little green piece, this is -1, 0, this little point. No, it's not. Oh my gosh. JK, it's -1, 1, and then it goes to 0, 2. So look at the x values. It starts with -1 and it ends at 0. That's that first little green piece. Now we're done with that one. We're going to talk about the next little green piece. So I'm going to write out the points for you so you can see a little better. Alright, we're going to talk about just the x values. A gap happened. It starts at 1 and it goes to 3. So we had 2 places that were green. That's why we have 2 interval notations. 2 places that were on our graph that were increasing, 2 intervals. Alright, and then let's do decreasing next. I'll do it in red. The only place it's decreasing is from here to here. There's only one place on the graph it's decreasing. There's only going to be one interval notation. So I'm going to write out the points. This is 0, 2, and this one is 1, -2. So I'm going to say where the x values start and stop. It starts at 0, it ends at 1. From 0 to 1, the graph is decreasing. Positive means it's above the x-axis. It's above the x-axis, all of this. Because everything else is below the x-axis. That's what positive means. So my leftmost point is -2, 1. My rightmost point, I'm going to say that's 0, let's call that 0.5, 0. So it starts when x is -2, it ends when x is 0.5. Negative means below the x-axis. So I'm going to do this in purple. It is below the x-axis, all of this. So it starts here at 0.5, 0. It ends at 3, 0. Starts when x is 0.5. It ends when x is 3. And any time at 0 is just where it hits the x-axis. So I'll do this in blue. The only place it hits the x-axis is right here. That coordinate point is 0.5, 0. We're doing interval notation, so we don't want to put 0.5, 0 because you would be saying it's 0 from 0.5 to 0. That's not what we're saying. So we're just going to say x is equal to 0.5. I know that's a little confusing. I'm going to give you some problems to try. Just if you have crayons, highlighters, markers at home, then try looking like color coding it like I do, and then only talking about the x values. And remember, anytime you do interval notation, you're doing start, stop. Anytime there's like 2 different sections and you have like a little gap, you're going to have an interval for this one, a U for this gap, and then an interval for this one. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to help. Bye.